Hello, colleagues. I am Kenneth Lim, and I'm a senior research scientist at the National Institute of Education. In this video, I share some of my thoughts and reflections on successfully completing the final report document for ERFP projects. Just to begin with, I thought I would share with you some of the grants that I have successfully completed over the past 14 years. In total, I've listed 18 grants, and so, if I can do it, so can you. So, what should we take note of when closing projects? I've tried to break it down into the following, namely, be organized, set aside the time, begin with the end in mind, and be disciplined. So, firstly, be organized. I guess organization can take many forms, but knowing where your datasets are and where your documents are, it would be of great help when closing projects, for reasons which will be apparent in the next couple of slides. I know this sounds very basic, but I have encountered colleagues who have lost track of where in their file directory on their computer the documents related to the grant are, and this doesn't really bode well for a successful project closure. Set aside the time. So, by set aside the time, I think two things can be gleaned. One is be on top of things and anticipate and plan. Basically, to be proactive about your time management and be mentally willing to devote the time for successful project closure, because there's no running away from the fact project closure does take time, by which I mean, mark your calendars, abide by the protocols that have been given to you, and work backwards from your calendar markings to the present day, and then formulate a plan on how you are going to use the remaining time available for your grant to close the project successfully. This is to avoid issues of last-minute rushing, which really has never helped anyone. Read all communication. Towards the end of your project, and more or less during projects as well, as you would probably have already discovered, the ERFP office does send us regular communication emails. Each time you receive such a mail, read it and make sure you take note of any and all deadlines and protocols and advice, because the ERFP office is a great source of advice, especially for PIs relatively new to the ERFP grant process. Begin with the end in mind. This is a well-known habit from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and beginning with the end in mind basically refers to the advice to start well and end well. In other words, if you want to end well, you need to start well. What I'm trying to say is that successful project closure doesn't just happen by accident, and it's not just something you do in your last 3 months of the grant. Successful project closure, as you are about to see from a couple of slides, requires consistent, steady effort throughout your grant. And that is why I say my last tip here for this slide is to be disciplined. Next, we have anticipating possible issues when producing the final report. In my experience at least, some of the possible issues are competing priorities, meandering thoughts, running out of time, running out of patience, and running out of money. So, for running out of money, I can't really advise you because, especially if you start running out of money towards the end of your project, that's a good thing because you've been using your budget well. But do set aside some funds for successful project closure, for example, to get those conference fees and publications going. Running out of time. You've made it this far with good time management, and therefore you shouldn't necessarily be running out of time, if you have understood the gist of the slide preceding this. Running out of patience. Lean into your own team. They've stood by you this far, and you can depend on them. Now, competing priorities and meandering thoughts. For competing priorities, keep stakeholders in the loop. For meandering thoughts, take breaks and look after your well-being. Keep stakeholders in the loop. Competing priorities will mean other things that compete for your attention apart from the successful closing of your ERFP grant. So, this could refer to anything like an annual appraisal. It could refer to the classes you teach. It could refer to media appearances or anything of the sort. Keep the stakeholders in the loop if you anticipate that there may be delays in any of your deliverables regarding the grant. Next, common issues encountered by the ERFP office. For this one, all the issues here on this slide have been contributed by our colleagues and friends from the office itself, so they know best which are the issues that often come in the way of successful grant closure. And these include discrepancies between the proposal, project amendments, and the final report. Such discrepancies could be in terms of the research questions, the research design, the number of participants, and so forth. The way, of course, to reduce the likelihood of this happening is to be meticulous and to be organized. That is why 2 slides ago I talked about the importance of being extremely organized throughout the entire process of your grant management, not just towards the end, but right from the beginning, once you've been awarded the funds and submitted the acceptance document, through your ethics approval, through your outreach to schools, and through the actual intervention itself. You need to be organized and you need to make sure that whatever you are doing in terms of the actual intervention is not just driven by a whim and fancy or just arbitrary interest, but is driven almost exclusively by the research design and research questions that you have contractually agreed with the ERFP office to conduct. A lack of elaboration on how the research objectives have been met. Related to this is a lack of evidence of the completed deliverables. This goes back again to my slide 2 slides ago regarding time management. If you practice good time management throughout the grant administration, you should not be encountering these problems of a lack of elaboration nor a lack of evidence, because you would have the necessary evidence and you would know where the necessary evidence, the data sets, the documentation, all lie within your file system. So, you need to keep yourself organized, you need to be proactive in terms of your time management, and you need to be very, very meticulous in terms of how you actually carry out the day-to-day operations on the ground. A good principal investigator is an expert not only at the macro level in terms of the big picture, but also at the mesoscale and the micro scales. So, that brings me to some closing encouragements. Keep the learner as your focus. This is an ERFP grant. The E stands for education, so keep the learner as your focus. Imparts confidence that the resources entrusted to you have been well spent. Imparts confidence that the stakeholders and participants you have interacted with have come away learning new skills, dispositions, and literacies. In other words, imparts confidence to the funding office that the funds and resources you have been entrusted with have been well spent benefiting the wider educational system. So, thank you very much for this opportunity. I am grateful to the ERFP office for graciously extending it to me, and I wish each of you the very best in your respective grant management. Thank you.